He courted his first love for 7 years, nearly got shot by his second, and found his ultimate match with his third. John Wayne's love life was as sweeping and dramatic as one of his Western epics. 3 women stole the Duke's heart at different points in his life, each romance filled with its own passion, challenges, and Hollywood-worthy moments. In this video, we'll journey through John Wayne's 3 great love stories: how a young unknown actor won over his childhood sweetheart, Josephine Saenz, how he plunged into a fiery marriage with Esperanza Chata Baur, and how a chance encounter in a jungle led him to Pilar Pallete, the woman who became his lasting partner. Stick around to discover the romantic gestures, the heartfelt struggles, and even the gunfire drama that marked the Duke's path to finding love. Number 3. Josephine Saenz. John Wayne's first love story begins in the roaring 1920s, long before he was a household name. In fact, he wasn't John Wayne yet at all, just Marion Morrison, a college football player with big dreams. As a teenager, Marion met Josephine Saenz at a beach party in Balboa, California. She was 15, he was 16, and the Pacific sunset that day wasn't the only thing casting a glow. Josephine, or Josie, as friends called her, was a beauty from a prominent family, the daughter of Panama's consul in Los Angeles, and she caught young Marion's eye instantly. He was smitten from the very first smile. But winning Josephine's heart and her family's approval turned out to be a 7-year adventure. Josephine's parents were protective and traditional. She was a devout Catholic from a wealthy Spanish Panamanian family, while he was a Presbyterian from a modest background. Her father looked at Marion, a movie studio prop boy and aspiring actor, and wasn't exactly impressed. How could this penniless college kid possibly provide a stable life for his daughter? John, as we'll call him, had to prove himself worthy, and that meant patience, persistence, and a whole lot of old-fashioned courting. John didn't back down. He might not have had money or fame yet, but he had earnest charm and determination. Throughout the late 1920s, he courted Josephine like a true gentleman of the era. He would drive his beat-up car to her family's home just to spend a few chaperoned hours with her, often dressed in his Sunday best, manners impeccable. They'd sit on her porch or go for walks, talking about everything and nothing, stealing shy glances that spoke volumes. When he had to be away, working bit parts on film sets or hauling props at Fox Studios, John wrote tender letters to Josephine, assuring her that no distance or long hours could lessen his love. It was a slow and steady courtship, the kind where every touch of the hand was a milestone. Yet, the couple faced significant challenges before they could be together openly. Family resistance. Josephine's family, especially her father, initially objected to the match. They worried about John's uncertain career and the fact that he wasn't Catholic. John had to visit her home repeatedly, proving over time that he was honorable, respectful, and deeply in love with their daughter. With each polite greeting and earnest conversation at the Saenz family dinner table, he gradually wore down their resistance. Financial struggle. To marry Josephine, John knew he needed a steady income. Acting wasn't paying well in those early days. He was getting small roles in low-budget westerns and often struggling to pay rent. Determined to provide a good life for Josephine, he took every job he could in Hollywood. He even considered other lines of work, but acting paid better than moving furniture or selling cars, so he stuck with it. John essentially rode off into dozens of small-time movie sunsets, just so he could save up and show Josephine's family he was a reliable man for her. Religious differences. Josephine's Catholic faith was important to her. John respected this deeply. He attended church with her, charmed the local priest, and showed that despite religious differences, he supported her beliefs. This went a long way toward melting Josephine's mother's heart and easing the family's concerns. For 7 long years, John and Josephine's love was kept in a kind of hopeful suspense. Many young romances would have fizzled out under the pressure, but not theirs. If anything, the weight strengthened their bond. By the early 1930s, John's perseverance started to pay off. He landed a lead role in 1930's The Big Trail, where director Raoul Walsh insisted on the stage name John Wayne. The film was not a huge success, but it put John on the map and gave him a bit more income. He kept grinding through dozens of B-movie roles afterward. He wasn't a superstar yet, but he was making a living. More importantly, he had shown Josephine's family that he was serious and here to stay. Finally, in June 1933, it was time. John Wayne, 26 years old, stood at the altar with 25-year-old Josephine Saenz. They were married in an intimate flower-studded ceremony hosted at the Los Angeles home of actress Loretta Young, one of Hollywood's biggest stars. Imagine the scene: white roses, a sunny California afternoon, and a crowd of friends and family clapping as the shy young cowboy actor kissed his radiant bride. After 7 years of courtship, John had finally won the girl. It felt like the happy ending of a movie, and in many ways, it was the beginning of a new one. In the years that followed, John's career took off slowly but surely. He and Josephine settled into married life and soon welcomed 4 children: Michael, Tony, Patrick, and Melinda. For a while, it seemed John was living his dream, a rising Hollywood career, and a loving home with his college sweetheart by his side. Whenever he talked about those early days, John's tough guy face would soften. He'd reminisce about how Josephine believed in him before anyone else, how her picture in his wallet got him through long location shoots in the desert. Josephine had been the girl who knew him when he was just Duke Morrison, a young man with a big heart and bigger dreams. Their love was genuine and nostalgic, rooted in youth and hope. However, life was not a constant fairy tale. By the 1940s, John Wayne's star was soaring with films like Stagecoach, and he was often away on set for months. Josephine, meanwhile, kept the home fires burning and raised the children, but the distance and John's newfound fame created strain. He was changing from Marion, the college kid, to John Wayne the icon, and Josephine, ever private and traditional, struggled with the Hollywood lifestyle. There were whispers of John's on-set flirtations, even a torrid affair with Marlene Dietrich at one point, and Josephine's heartache grew. The devoted girl who waited 7 years for him was now a lonely wife, often waiting up at night for her husband to return from far-flung film shoots. Ultimately, the couple grew apart. In 1943, after a decade of marriage, they quietly separated, and by 1945, their once fairy tale union ended in divorce. It was a painful chapter for both. John was crestfallen. He had truly loved Josephine, but he hadn't been around enough to show it, and their differences had become too great. Josephine, for her part, cited John's hectic career and their religious differences as factors. She had tried to hold the family together, even seeking counsel from a priest to save the marriage, but it wasn't enough. After 12 years as Mrs. John Wayne, Josephine said goodbye. Their love story that began on a Balboa beach ended with a sad wave and tears. John Wayne was heartbroken and racked with guilt. This was his first great love, and now it was over. At 38, the Duke found himself single, lonely, and unsure if he'd ever find that kind of love again. Little did he know his next romance was just around the corner, and it would be as passionate and tumultuous as a summer storm on the Mexican horizon. Number 2. Esperanza Chata Baur. John and Esperanza actually first met years earlier, in 1941, at a party in Mexico City, while John was still married to Josephine. At that time, it was a friendly introduction. She was a stunning 21-year-old socialite, and he a 34-year-old Hollywood star visiting town. Nothing scandalous happened then, but John certainly remembered her warmth and beauty. Fast forward to 1945. John was a free man now, and when he ran into Esperanza again in Mexico, sparks flew fast and fierce. Unlike the slow courtship with Josephine, John's romance with Esperanza was a whirlwind. Here was a woman who was bold, vivacious, and unafraid to speak her mind. She had dark, flashing eyes and a laugh that could fill a room. For a grieving John Wayne, Chata's lively company was like a shot of tequila after a long, dull spell, invigorating and intoxicating. He fell hard and quickly, eager to banish his loneliness. But being a naturally shy man with women, yes, the towering Duke could get tongue-tied around a pretty girl. John didn't rush in like a movie hero swinging her off her feet. Instead, he wooed Chata in a courtly, gentle manner that surprised those who knew his rough-and-tumble screen persona. John's approach to courting Esperanza could have come from an old-fashioned romance manual. He showered her with thoughtful gestures right from the start. Every time he picked her up for an outing in Mexico City, He arrived with something in hand, a bouquet of her favorite flowers one day, a small wrapped gift the next, perhaps a perfume or a piece of jewelry he thought would make her smile. They frequented elegant restaurants and lively nightclubs, where John would pull out the chair for her, toast to her beauty with champagne, and dance with her under the dim lights. Often they weren't alone. John was still a bit nervous being one-on-one, so he'd invite mutual friends or go to social events. Over tortillas and tequila, laughter and music, their connection deepened. Esperanza was impressed by John's manners and his respectful yet earnest interest in her. He made her feel like the center of the world, escorting her to bullfights and banquets, introducing her proudly as if she were a queen. The rugged cowboy actor had become a true caballero for his lady. It wasn't all grand gestures. There were quiet moments, too. On Sunday afternoons, they might stroll through Chapultepec Park, hand in hand, John attempting some Spanish sweet talk with his distinct Midwestern drawl, which made Esperanza giggle. He listened to her dreams of restarting her acting career and her stories of family and childhood. In these moments, John wasn't the Hollywood icon Duke. He was just a man falling in love, eager to make a woman who'd brightened his dark days feel loved in return. After only a few months of this passionate courtship, expectations were high. In conservative 1940s Mexico, a whirlwind romance like theirs naturally led to talk of marriage, and John, still a firm believer in the sanctity of marriage despite just coming out of one, was inclined to settle down again quickly. On January 17, 1946, John Wayne and Esperanza Baur tied the knot in a civil ceremony in California, followed by a church blessing in Mexico. John was nearly 39, Esperanza was 26. She became his second wife, and John hoped that this marriage would fill the lonely void in his life and give him a fresh start. For a time, John and Esperanza's life together was blissful. They set up home in Hollywood, and Chata enthusiastically stepped into the role of a star's wife, attending premieres on John's arm in glamorous gowns, hosting parties at their house where she charmed John's industry friends with her wit and Latin hospitality. She was proud of her husband's fame, and he adored having a beautiful, spirited partner to share his world with. When John was on location filming, Esperanza often accompanied him, unwilling to be left behind. The honeymoon phase was filled with adventure and passion, and John felt a renewed energy having Chata by his side. However, real life has a way of testing even the most passionate of romances. Over the months and years, cracks began to show. Esperanza loved John deeply, but she struggled with insecurities that slowly started to poison their happiness. John's life was very different from what she knew. He was constantly busy, surrounded by adoring fans and attractive co-stars, and he already had 4 children with Josephine that he cared for. Esperanza had no children of her own, and sometimes felt left out of that part of John's life. As the initial excitement settled, she became jealous of John's time and attention. She resented the long hours he devoted to film sets and grew suspicious of any close friendship he had with female colleagues. John tried to reassure her, but Chata's fiery temper occasionally flared. They began to argue, often fueled by alcohol. John enjoyed his bourbon, and Esperanza herself liked to drink socially, which sometimes got out of hand. The once gentlemanly courtship turned into a volatile marriage, with dramatic ups and downs. John described it at one point like shaking 2 volatile chemicals in a jar. Their personalities could ignite an explosion or fizzle into silence, unpredictably. One incident, in particular, has become legendary in Hollywood lore and marked the climax of their troubled union. In 1947, John starred in Angel and the Bad Man, opposite a young actress named Gail Russell. Rumors swirled that John and Gail were more than just co-stars, rumors both John and Gail adamantly denied. But Esperanza's jealousy was in overdrive. She convinced herself that John had been unfaithful, whether there was any truth to it or not. The night that film wrapped, the studio threw a cast party. John attended and ended up coming home very late, likely after midnight. Esperanza had been stewing at home, possibly sipping tequila and letting dark thoughts cloud her mind. When John finally opened the front door, tired and unaware of what awaited, he was met with a terrifying sight. Esperanza standing there with a revolver in her hand. In a drunken rage, she accused him of cheating and, in that heated moment, pulled the trigger as he stepped through the doorway. The bullet whizzed past John, missing him, fortunately, but embedding in the door frame. She had actually tried to shoot her husband. For a man who'd faced plenty of outlaws on screen, this was a real-life showdown he never expected. John was stunned and furious, and Esperanza broke down sobbing after her outburst. No one was physically hurt, but something between them shattered irreparably that night. After the gun incident, any remaining trust was gone. Their home became a battlefield of accusations and apologies. Friends would find John sleeping over on their couches more and more, as he often fled the house to avoid further fights. By 1952, the marriage had hit rock bottom. They separated, and a bitter divorce battle began, dragging through the press with nasty allegations on both sides. Esperanza claimed John was physically abusive, which he denied, and John countered by highlighting Esperanza's drinking and even accusing her of having an affair of her own at one point. It was ugly and painful, the complete opposite of how their love story began. In the end, the divorce was finalized in 1954. John walked away emotionally exhausted and disillusioned about love. "I won't say it was all her fault or all mine," he reflected to a friend, "but we just weren't suited. We loved each other, but we brought out the worst in each other." Esperanza had given him excitement and passion, but also heartbreak and chaos. After this turbulent chapter, John, now in his mid-40s, wasn't sure he had the heart to risk another romance. He felt, in his own words, lonelier than a lone ranger. Once again, a solitary cowboy riding into the sunset, unsure if anyone would be waiting for him at home. Little did he know, destiny had one more great love in store for him, one that would arrive unexpectedly from a far-off land, bringing with it the hope of a calmer, enduring happiness. Number 1. Pilar Pallete. In 1952, John Wayne found himself in the Peruvian Amazon on a scouting trip for an upcoming film. He was preparing to direct The Alamo and was touring South America, combining work with a bit of adventure. Deep in the lush greenery near a small town called Tingo Maria, a local film production was underway. There, under the golden light of tiki torches, a petite young actress was performing a traditional dance for a movie scene, moving gracefully to the strum of guitars and the clap of hands. John, curious and captivated, watched from the sidelines as this dark-haired beauty danced with firelight flickering in her eyes. The actress's name was Maria del Pilar Pallete. When the director called cut, Pilar stepped away from the flames, catching her breath. That's when she was introduced to the tall American observing her. Imagine the scene. Pilar, just 23 years old, still glowing from the dance, looking up, way up, at the 45-year-old Hollywood legend, who stood 6'4". John smiled, and in his polite, slightly bashful way said, "That was quite a dance." Pilar, honored and a little starstruck, thanked him. They ended up having dinner together that evening, both accompanied by members of the film crew and local hosts. Over plates of Peruvian cuisine, John and Pilar talked for hours. Despite the age gap and coming from different worlds, they connected easily. Pilar spoke English well. She was the daughter of a Peruvian senator and had an international upbringing, and she loved the arts and films. She was also married at the time. In fact, her husband was a businessman back in Lima, so this was purely a friendly encounter, though one charged with an undeniable spark. John was technically still married, too. His troubles with Esperanza were ongoing. So romance wasn't on the menu that night, but a genuine rapport was. As the night wound down, Pilar revealed she was also a singer and sometimes played the guitar. At the gentle urging of the group, she took up a guitar and serenaded them with a lovely folk song under the stars. John watched, enthralled. The scene was like something out of a dream. Here he was, thousands of miles from Hollywood, unexpectedly enchanted by this talented, sweet-natured young woman, strumming a guitar and singing from her heart. When the evening ended, John thanked Pilar for the wonderful time. He told her he hoped their paths would cross again. Before he left Peru the next day, John made a romantic gesture that could have leapt straight from a movie screen. He bought a brand new guitar and had it delivered to Pilar with a note expressing his admiration for her talent and hopes that she'd continue to make beautiful music. It was a simple yet thoughtful gift, one that left Pilar both astonished and touched. Then John flew back to the United States, returning to his messy divorce battle and busy life, unsure if he would ever actually see Pilar Pallete again. As fate would have it, their story was far from over. The first meeting had been magical, but the timing wasn't right. The second meeting would change everything. In early 1953, about a year later, Pilar moved to Los Angeles. She had decided to pursue her acting career in Hollywood and came to dub an English version of a film she'd done, Sabotage in the Jungle, appropriately named for where John first saw her dancing. When John heard that Pilar was in town, he didn't waste a moment. He reached out and welcomed her to Los Angeles. True to his supportive nature, he arranged for a screen test for Pilar at his production company. He remembered her talent and thought she might just be the fresh face Hollywood needed. Pilar was thrilled to be under contract with John Wayne's company. It was an opportunity beyond her dreams. Working together brought John and Pilar closer. John's divorce from Esperanza was still pending in the courts in 1953, so he and Pilar were discreet. At first, their relationship was professional and friendly. John would invite Pilar to dinner, but often at a friend's home or a quiet, out-of-the-way restaurant, so as not to stir up gossip while his legal matters were unresolved. Those dinners, however, became the highlight of John's week. After long, stressful days, spent wrangling with lawyers and studio execs, he'd find relief in Pilar's company. She was uplifting, always cheerful, full of stories about Peru or funny anecdotes about learning her way around American life. Her youth and optimism were like a balm to his weary soul. It wasn't long before friendship blossomed into full-fledged love. John realized that whenever Pilar walked into the room, his spirits lifted. She, in turn, found herself falling for the gentle, gallant man behind the famous movie star facade. He might have been 2 decades older, but John had a boyish sincerity and an almost courtly way of treating her that made her feel treasured. They shared quiet moments, driving along the California coast, enjoying simple pleasures like ice cream cones on the Santa Monica Pier, or listening to music at his house, Pilar strumming that guitar he gave her, perhaps, while John hummed along. Of course, Hollywood gossip eventually caught wind of their closeness. Some whispered that John had found a new love even before his divorce was final. Initially, he tried to keep things low-key, but by late 1953, he decided he didn't care what anyone thought. He was falling in love and refused to hide it. At a prominent Los Angeles nightclub one evening, photographers snapped photos of John Wayne escorting a stunning young Latin woman, Pilar, on his arm. Flashbulbs popped as they entered. When a reporter slyly asked John who his lovely companion was, John beamed with pride and answered plainly, "She's with me." It was a simple statement, but coming from the Duke in front of the Hollywood press, it was essentially a public proclamation of love. John was saying, "Yes, I'm with Pilar Pallete, and I'm not afraid to let the world know." In the fall of 1954, John's divorce from Esperanza finally came through. He didn't waste any time. On November 1st, 1954, John Wayne and Pilar Pallete were married in a low-key ceremony in Hawaii, where John was on location filming The Sea Chase. The wedding took place in the beautiful garden of his friend's home overlooking the ocean, a tropical paradise setting that felt fitting for the new chapter in John's life. He was 47, she was 26, and both were absolutely radiant with hope and happiness. Close friends who attended said John looked like a love-struck schoolboy when Pilar walked down the makeshift aisle with flowers in her hair. After the intimate I-dos, they celebrated with a casual luau-style reception, tiki torches, Hawaiian music, and champagne toasts under the stars. The Duke had married the woman of his dreams against a sunset backdrop, very much like a climactic romantic scene in one of his films, except this time it was wonderfully real. Life with Pilar proved to be the steady, enriching love John had been searching for. The early years of their marriage were filled with adventure and joy. Pilar traveled with John all over the world for his film shoots, whether it was the sands of the Sahara for Legend of the Lost or the sound stages of Hollywood, she was by his side. In 1956, Pilar gave birth to their first child together, a daughter named Isa. John was over the moon to be a new dad again, proudly cradling the baby girl in one arm and making silly faces. Who would have thought the Duke could coo like a softie? They went on to have two more children, a son, Ethan, in 1962, and another daughter, Marissa, in 1966. John, who already had four older kids, jumped back into diaper duty and school recitals with gusto, this time a bit older, a bit wiser, and with Pilar's steady support keeping the family bonded. Pilar herself decided to step away from acting, to focus on being a wife and mother. She often said that John was the star, and she was happy being the hearth that warmed his home. But that doesn't mean she lost her identity. Far from it. Pilar was an artist at heart. Later in life, she even became a painter and author, and John admired her independent spirit and creativity. The two shared a mutual respect and friendship in addition to love. Sure, like any couple, they had disagreements. The age difference, and John's traditional ways versus Pilar's youthful perspective, could cause friction, but they handled it with communication and humor. John would sometimes grumble about something, and Pilar would arch an eyebrow and playfully call him Duke, in a tone that made him laugh at himself. They complemented each other beautifully. For John, Pilar brought peace. He once joked that Pilar's temperament was as soothing as a Sunday morning, a stark contrast to the turmoil he'd known before. She understood him, both the public hero and the private man. When John faced a battle with lung cancer in 1964, Pilar was his rock. She nursed him through recovery, offering strength and optimism on the darkest days. John beat that cancer and credited Pilar's love as a big part of what gave him courage. They truly were partners through thick and thin. Their marriage wasn't without its trials. By the early 1970s, they lived separately, though never divorced. But Pilar remained John's loyal companion until his death in 1979. In interviews, John often referred to Pilar as the love of my life, and Pilar, even decades later, speaks of John with a fond glow, recalling the wonderful memories they shared, from sailing on John's yacht Wild Goose and dancing under the moon in Tahiti, to quiet family dinners where he carved the turkey with theatrical flair just to make the kids laugh. Their romance had started in the most cinematic way and endured far longer than any Hollywood film run. It was real and deep, the lasting love that John had been searching for all along.